Hi everyone, I'm Trish Connor-Cato and I'll be presenting Microsoft Access 2019. So now we're on to Module 2. Lesson 1 is using forms for data entry. So in this lesson, we're going to create forms, we're going to explore the different layouts, we're going to perform data entry in the form, and we're going to use the Learn It logo file. I mentioned earlier that you'll get very familiar with the Create tab on the ribbon. Let's go there now. So whenever you're creating something in here, other than our tables, which we did a little bit differently, right? We started 2 in design view, but then we used import from Excel for the rest of them. But you're going to be using the Create tab on the ribbon for that. We did it for the query wizard and to get to query design view, right? And we're going to do the same thing for forms. So for forms, we're going to start by going to the form wizard, and you can base a form on a table or query. And just like the query wizard, it's asking you which fields do you want, right? So we want to base this first form on the customer's table. So I'm going to do the drop down and select table TBL customers. And I want all of the fields except the customer ID field. So there's an easy way of doing that. Instead of double clicking each field that you want, you can use the double arrow to bring all fields over to the right side. And then I'm going to scroll up and I'm going to click on customer ID and use the single back arrow to get rid of it. Remember, the customer ID field is an auto number field. So if you're using the form for data entry, people can't input into that field. There's no reason to have it on the form. So we're going to do next here, now that we have our field set. You have 4 different layouts that you can choose for your form. We're going to leave it on columnar, but you can come through and do this drill again and each time select a different layout. So they have a little preview here. If I click on tabular, you see how the preview looks. It looks more like an Excel spreadsheet. Data sheet looks similar, except it has the row headings on there. And then you have justified. We're going to leave it on columnar and do next. What title do you want for your form? Well, we don't want it to say TBL customers because that's the wrong prefix. So I'm going to swap out TBL for FRM, as that is the standard prefix for a form. And then we're going to just click on finish. So now you have a form. It has all of the fields from the customer table except for the customer ID field. The form that you're viewing is populating with the first client or customer record. And if you look at the bottom, at the navigation area, you have your record navigation. It's on 1 of 18. If I do the right pointing arrow next to 18, it'll bring me to the next record. If I do the right pointing arrow with the line next to it, it will take me all the way to the last record. So, and I also have the next button over is a new blank record, and we'll come back and use this form for data entry in just a little bit. The first thing that we want to do with this form, though, is we don't want it to say FRM customers, right? So when you create the form in the wizard, if you right click on the form tab, you'll see that it opened in form view. And that's the view that you would be doing data entry or changing data from. But we want to change that header on the form. So we're going to go to layout view to do this. And when you're in layout view, you can actually make changes to what's on the form, and you can see the underlying data in the form. So the first thing we're going to change is where it says FRM customers. We're going to get rid of the FRM, get rid of the S in customers, and just customer entry form is what we're going to type there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that box a little bit wider so that it doesn't do a word wrap in there. The other thing we're going to do is, like, some of these fields don't have to be as wide as they are, right? Some of them do. In this view, layout view, if you click on like the state field itself where it says CA, you'll notice the orange box around it, and I can make that field less wide. Depends on how you want your form to look. And we'll take a look at it in another view, which is design view. So right click on the tab again, and this time go to design view. It's very rare that I use design view to create a form. I might go into design view to move stuff around, but I very rarely create a form in design view. But that's just my personal choice. When I came into layout view and also in design view, you'll see the field list is open on the right side. I don't need that right now. I can just close it using the X in its upper right hand corner. So we made a change to this form. We'll circle back around and use it for data entry. In the meantime, we're going to go ahead and close the form, and it will prompt us to save our changes to its design. Now I'd like you to pause the video and use the form wizard again. This time, I want you to create a form based on the employees table and use all the fields except employee ID. And in the wizard, you should have named it FRM employees. If you didn't, you can close it and rename it in the navigation pane by right-clicking and choosing rename. We're going to do a similar thing here. We're going to change the title of this form. So I'm going to put the form in layout view, and I'm going to just get rid of the FRM and the S at the end of employees, and it's going to be employee entry form. And I'm going to widen the box just like we did for the customers. I can get my mouse in the right place, that is. I just don't want it to word wrap. And at this point, we can go ahead and close the form and save the changes. Now we're ready to create a couple of forms by using Form Design View. So we're back at the Create tab on the ribbon. And this time in the Forms group, we're going to click on Form Design. So we're looking at an empty grid, and in order to create the form, we need to see the fields that we're going to want to be using. So on the Form Design tab of the ribbon, which you're on by default, in the Tools group to the right, you're going to go ahead and click on Add Existing Fields, which opens the field list that we saw briefly before. So when we click on that, you'll get a field list that shows up on the right side, and it has a link that says Show All Tables. Click that link. And now you're seeing all of the tables that we have in this database. We're going to create a form based off of the orders table. So I'm going to expand the orders table by clicking the plus sign in front of it to see the fields that are in it. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can do this. What I typically do is we want every field except order ID, because order ID is going to be an automatically populated field. So I'm going to right click on customer ID, and I'm going to choose add field to view. And notice how it places it on the grid, right? And I'm going to do the same thing. I want a few other fields in there. So I'm going back. So I added customer ID, and it's showing it from the customers table because that's where it is a primary key field. I'm going to expand orders again, and I'm going to put in the order date field by right clicking on it and adding field to view. Now I'm going to scroll down so I can see the remaining field, which is ship date. This one we're going to do a little differently. But notice that when you put the field on the grid, it adds the field. On my screen right now, order date field has the yellow highlight around it. But each field has a label saying what the field name is. So if you're going to drag and drop to the grid, you need to make sure that you leave enough room for that label. You don't want to drag something all the way over to the left side. So for ship date, I'm going to click and hold on it, and I'm going to drag it onto the grid, but I'm not going to go all the way over to the left so I have enough room for the label. Just want to be careful about that. Typically, and so the ship date field is already selected. I'm going to just press delete on my keyboard to get rid of it. You notice how the other two fields are lined up. We chose add to view. So I'm going to right click on ship date and choose add field to view. Because we had it somewhere else, now it wants to put it on top of something. I am using my down arrow key to move that field and its corresponding label underneath order date. You could also drag it, but I feel like you get more control when you use the arrow keys to move things around in this grid structure. So now we want to add a label to this form, and we want to put it in the form header section, which is currently not showing. The fields that we added to this form are showing in the detail section. If you right click on detail, click on form header footer from the shortcut menu. And now you have a form header and a form footer section. Also, if you right click on either detail, form header, or form footer, you'll see that you also have a page header footer option, which we're not going to use now. The form header only shows on the first page of a form, as does the form footer only shows on the last page of a form. If you have a multiple page form and you want a header and footer on every page, you would use the page header and footer designation. So we're good with form header. We just want to put more space in the form header section. So when I put my mouse in between form header and detail, I can click and hold and drag down just a little bit. And then I want to add a label to the form header section. And in the label, we'll put text with the name of what we want to call this form, the actual plain English name. So if you look at the form design tab on the ribbon, you have a whole controls group, and it has a gallery of different types of controls that you can use. This would be the same for forms as it is for reports as well. They both have similar design interfaces. So some of those controls, they range from a text box, a label. You can put a button on a form, which you'll see in a later module that we get to in this course. And if I open up the controls gallery by using this More button, I'll see that I have combo boxes, list boxes, option buttons, check boxes, all different kinds of controls. Controls are objects that you put on forms and reports in the way we're using them now. So out of those controls, we want the label control, which is the capital A and the small letter A. So I'm going to click on it to activate it, and I'm going to hover my mouse over the form header section, and I'm going to just click in that section, and it gives me a really tiny label. So another way of doing this is I'm going to do Control Z, which is undo, go back and grab the label control again. And this time when I hover over the form header section, I'm going to click and hold, and I'm manually going to draw a label about the size that I want it to be. And then my insertion point is in the label. So I'm going to go ahead and type, and we base this off of the orders table. So I'm going to call it order entry form. And I'm going to click outside of the label, and I'm going to size it down. It doesn't need to be that big, maybe. But then I decided I probably want the font to be a little bit larger. So with the label control selected, I'm going to the Format tab on the ribbon, and I'm going to increase my font size for the label to 14 point. Just so it's a little bit larger than the regular stuff that's going to be on the form. And so there I have it. I have a title for my form in the form header, and I have the 3 fields that we wanted to see in the detail section. Now what's left to be done is saving it. So I'm going to right click on the tab, and I'm going to choose Save, and we're going to use FRM Orders is what we're going to name it. and click OK. Now it shows in the navigation pane, and while it's still open, let's right-click on the tab and go to Form View. That's what the form will look like when you look at it. So it's already populated with everything, all the records from the orders table. You have 30-something records there, right? But you have a pretty nice looking form. And we did it in Design View. Let's go ahead and close this form. And I'm going to have you go back to Design View, and you're going to create another form on your own. So we'll get started by going to Create, Form Design, and your field list should still be open. If not, on that Form Design tab in the Tools group, you can click on Add Existing Fields to relaunch it. And what you're going to do for this one is you're going to base it off of the products table, and we want all of the fields from the products table on this form. After you get the fields on the form, you're going to show the form header section, and you're going to put a label in that section, and you're going to label it Products Entry Form. So go ahead and get started on that one. You can pause the video. So I used all of the fields, and I put the label in my form. I called it Product Entry Form, and I saved the form. So I'm going to go and look at it in Form View, and there you have it. So your form should look similar to mine, and it should be named FRM Products in the navigation pane. You can go ahead and close that form. Now we're going to use two of our forms for data entry. We're going to use the customers form and the employees form, and you're going to reference the manual data entry Word document that's in your working directory. And for each of those, you're going to use the yellow shaded record. So I'm going to go ahead and double click FRM Customers to open it, and right click on the tab, and you'll see that when you open it, you are in Form View. That's the working view. And I'm going to go down to the record navigation area and click on New Blank Record. And I'm just going to be using my tab key to tab between the fields here. So we don't have the customer ID on here because, again, that's auto numbered. You'll see how this ties together. So I'm going to start typing in the information. And you can go ahead and pause the video and do the same thing. So a couple of things about the customer form. The input mask for the phone number is not carrying over there. That's a table property. Also, whether the customer is active or not is now in this view showing as true or false. So I changed it to true. We could go to design and replace that. That's a text box. We could replace it with a checkbox if we wanted to. And then I just selected the first employee named Rogers on the list there. So you're going to do the same with your employees form. I'm going to just close my customers form and open up my employees form and add the new record that's in that manual data entry file. And once I get that record in, I can just go ahead and I'm going to close both of my forms now. Now, if you want to see that the data is actually in your database, you would want to open up the table. So I'm going to open up my customers table, and you'll see that the last record is Piper's Music, and you could do the same with your employees table. Now on my end, it's skipping a couple of numbers here because I did something on the back end I shouldn't have done. I can fix that, but just so you know, your next number in the sequence should be 19 for Piper's Music, and I will fix mine the next time that you're pausing on the video. So we have that information. It flows from the form into the table, and you can look at your employees table and you'll see that Bob Zipster is the last employee in that table at this time. And again, I have the same issue with the employee ID, but I'm going to fix that. I did some fiddling around that I shouldn't have done, but I'm going to make sure that that is in a sequential number. So anyway, you've completed forms using the form wizard, and you did it in form design view. So let's just review. I'm going to go ahead and close the employees form. Well, I'm going to close both of those tables actually. And I just want to reopen the customer's form. But this time, instead of double clicking it, I'm going to right click on it and I want to revisit layout view. So form view is the view that you work in, but layout view, you can do some design things in layout view. Really, the difference between layout and design view for both forms and reports, which we're going to get to, is that in layout view, you see the underlying data. So if I wanted to make a field not as wide, I can do it in layout view, and my guide is the underlying data. So I don't think I have any company names that are any wider than this. So I could do that change in layout view using the underlying data as a guide. If I take the form to design view and I'm resizing fields here, I'm not seeing all of the data. Or any of the data, I'm just seeing the name of the field. So it could be a trickier proposition to do it in this view, although you can also do those types of changes in design view. Our second lesson in this module is creating reports for data output. So we're going to, similar to what we did when we created a query, we can base a report on a query. And we're going to do that, and we're going to use the report wizard for the first time around. Then we'll move on to how to preview and print your reports. We'll go into report design so you can get used to the interface. It'll be very familiar to you. It's almost identical to forms. And then we'll get into how to format our reports. So like everything else we've been creating in here, except for our tables in particular, we've been using the Create tab on the ribbon, and the same is true for reports. So on the Create tab of the ribbon, you also have a reports group, and in that group, you're going to click on Report Wizard to start the wizard. So just like a query or the form wizard, right, we can tell it which fields we want on our report. And we want to base this report off of our products query. So I'm going to do the drop down and select QRY products. And then we want all of the fields on the report. So I'm going to use the double arrow to move them over to the right. And then I'm going to click next. When you're creating a report using the wizard, you can add grouping levels to your report. So we want our report to be grouped by product name. I'm going to go ahead and double click on product name. So you see in a little preview, for each product name in your report, it will show the ID, the price, and the category ID because of the grouping that we just did. We're going to go ahead and do next. You can also sort your records by up to 4 fields when you're creating a report, right? It's going to be sorted by product name for us, and that's not on the list. So we're good here. We can just do next. And you have 3 different layouts for your report. We're going to leave it on stepped, but if you look at block, you'll see how the preview updates. And if you look at outline, you'll see how it updates as well. So we're going to leave it on stepped. We'll leave the portrait orientation, and we'll leave the checkbox adjust the field width so all fields fit on a page, and we'll do next. So now the only thing we have to do is name it, and we're going to use RPT as our object prefix for a report. So I'm going to just get rid of the QRY in front of products and type RPT. And then I'm going to go ahead and click Finish. When you complete a report using the report wizard, it opens in what's called Preview View. As a matter of fact, if you look at your ribbon, you only have the File tab, And you have a print preview tab on the ribbon right now, just because of the view that the report opened up in. So you're looking at what the report will look like if you were to print it. That's what you're seeing right now. And we look at this report and we say, well, if we had lots of the same product name, perhaps with different product IDs, it would make sense to group this report. But in this case, you're seeing for each product name, then it's showing the product ID, the price, and the category ID. And we decide we don't need it to be grouped. So before we do anything else with this, we're going to just close this report. And since it's closed, we're going to delete it in the navigation pane by right-clicking on it and choosing delete. And then you're going to confirm the deletion. We're going to go back to create and back into report wizard. And we're going to do the same report, but we're not going to put any grouping levels. I think it'll look a little bit better without the grouping levels. So we're going to do our drop down for tables and queries and go to QRY products again, grab all of the fields, do next, ignore this screen by just doing next. We're not going to do a grouping. We're not doing a sort. I'm going to put it back on, it's defaulting here to tabular. So I'm going to leave it on the tabular layout. Before it had a different layout because of the grouping. And I'm going to do next. And I'm going to just rename it here by getting rid of QRY and putting in RPT products. And I'm going to do finish. So now this report looks a little bit better without the grouping. It's just not a good one to group. Sometimes you don't know that until you run it. And then you look at it and you say, that doesn't make sense here. So we are in print preview. As I said, you get the print preview tab on the ribbon where you can print the report. You can change the paper size, the margins, so on and so forth, the orientation. You have a whole Zoom group where if you had multiple pages in the report, you could see more pages than one at a time. And you also have the ability here, if you notice, you can export from the report directly to Excel, a text file, PDF, and even more. So Word, they have a whole bunch of different options there. And the last choice there is close print preview. So I can right click on the RPT products tab, and let's take a look at it in report view. So report view is a non-editable view, right? You're just viewing the report here. And typically you're looking at your reports in print preview view, but reports have 4 different views, and this is just one of them. We're going to right click on the tab again, and we're going to go to layout view. Layout view is the same in a report as it is in a form in a query, meaning that you can modify fields here. When it's in a report, every field is grouped together. So the product ID field doesn't need to be as wide as it is. When I click on the first product ID, that one has an orange border, but the other product IDs have a yellow border. All of them are selected. So the action I take on one is going to impact the others. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to resize it so it's not quite that wide. I'm putting my mouse on the right edge, clicking and holding, and just dragging backwards a little bit to resize it. All right? Don't need that much space for the product ID field. You can do things like that. You could do it here in layout view where you're seeing the underlying data, or you could also do that kind of stuff in design view. Let's right click on the tab and go to design view. In design view, we want to change that report header from RPT products, and we're going to just get rid of the RPT. And we're going to, after the word products, we're going to just put products list report. So we change the heading there. And you'll see that it has a report header and report footer, which show up on the first page, or the footer shows on the last page of a report. Page headers and page footers show on every page. And then you have the details section, which is showing the information. So now that we change that heading, I'm going to save the report by right-clicking, and I'm going to go back to print preview view, and you can see that the heading has changed. So we used the report wizard and we created our products report. So now we're going to just switch back to design view again for this report. And we want to add the Learn It logo that's in the files that you access from the video description. So we can, if I click in the report header and I look at that report design tab, it looks just like form design, right? It has your groups, your controls, all of these different things. I can insert an image anywhere in the report, but what I'm going to do in the header footer section group, I'm going to click on logo. Once you click on logo, navigate to the working directory where you save the Learn It logo from the video description and double click it. So it popped the logo right on top of the label that says products list report, and the logo is selected. So I'm using the right arrow key on my keyboard to just move that logo over. And then I'll show you another trick for resizing it. If you hold down your shift key and you use your arrow keys, your right arrow key, it will resize the logo so it's bigger. So you might want to move it so it's not so far to the right, and then hold down shift and use your right arrow key to make it wider so it's a little bit more visible. So now we have the Learn It logo as part of the report header as well. Go ahead and save your report and switch back to print preview view so you can see what that looks like. And then you can go ahead and close that report. So just to recap what we've covered in Module 2, we created and used forms for data entry. We created forms a couple of different ways, and we created reports using the report wizard. So we were able to go in and do some formatting, like adding a logo to the report, changing the title, and all of that. The first lesson in Module 3 is how table relationships affect queries. In this lesson, we're going to review table relationships, and we're going to add some relationship security, which I mentioned earlier in the course. So we're going to make our way back to the Relationships window, which is on the Database Tools tab of the ribbon. And this is where we were when we created our relationships. So when we created this relationships, I mentioned that the relationship line, the join line, looks different than it did in the Northwind database. In the Northwind database, it had the number 1 next to the table on the one side of the relationship, and it had the infinity symbol on the other side of the line for the table that's in the many part of the relationship. So how does that happen? That happens through relationship security, which we're going to delve into now. So we're going to start with the relationship between the orders and the order details table. And what we're going to do is we're going to just double click that join line, and the edit relationships box comes up. So when we did this earlier, when we created our joins, we just did okay. We didn't do anything on the bottom half of the screen other than look at the relationship type one to many. So we're going to go over these checkboxes: enforce referential integrity, cascade update related fields, and cascade delete related records. If you enforce referential integrity by checking that box, the other 2 checkboxes become available to you. Let's look at a slide and see what these 3 items mean and their impact on your database. So relationship security is really about enforcing referential integrity, the very top checkbox. The purpose of this is to prevent what's called orphan records, records that reference other records that no longer exist. So let's say we didn't enforce referential integrity, right? that would allow me to delete or to change a record, say in the customers table, but a reference to that record in a related table will not change unless you use the other two choices, the other checkboxes. So referential integrity prevents orphaned records. It will not allow referencing records that no longer exist. Those are known as orphan records. So once you enable that, you get the choice to cascade update related fields. So it updates, if you do an update, if you make a change in the one side table, right, to a field or something, in the one side of the one-to-many relationship table, it will be reflected in related tables. You wouldn't want to update something in one table and not have that update flow to related fields in other tables. You can just get a mixed bag of records if you allow that to happen. And then cascade delete related records. Now this one requires a little bit more thought. So if you delete a record in the one side of the relationship table, the records will be deleted in related tables. But sometimes you may not want that to happen. Like you may have a sales table or an orders table, for example, that you want to keep because it's historical data. So you wouldn't want to delete the related records. I might make a copy of the table and start a new one so that I have the historical one stored somewhere else, something like that. So this is what relationship security is referring to, and we're going to set it up now. So back in our database in the Edit Relationships window, and again, this is the relationship between the orders and the order details table, we're going to go ahead and check the box to enforce referential integrity. And we're going to check the box for cascade update related fields. We're not going to do anything about deleting related records. We're going to just click OK. And when you do that, now you'll see the relationship type noted on the join line. You have a 1 next to the orders table, and you have the infinity symbol next to the order details table. So reflecting which side of the relationship that each table is on. The orders table is on the one side, and the orders details table is on the other side. So one order can have many details. And you'll only get those symbols on the join line when you're enforcing security on your relationships. So we're going to do the same thing for all of our other join lines here. So I'm going to double click the join line between order details and products, enforce referential integrity, and cascade update related records. And I'm going to click OK. We're not going to use our cascade delete option for any of these tables. So you can go ahead and pause the video and enforce referential integrity and cascade update for the other two remaining relationships. When you attempt to enforce referential integrity between the employees and the customers table, you may get this error message that I have on my screen. Relationship must be on the same number of fields, which is not the problem here, with the same data types. So we need to fix a data type before we can come and enforce referential integrity here. So I'm going to click OK and then cancel the Edit Relationships dialog. And I'm going to just close out of our relationships window. And so if I right click on the customers table and I go to design view, I'll see that the employee field there is a short text field. When I open the employees table in design view, you'll see that the employee ID field is an auto number field. So we can't make the employee field in the customers table an auto number field because we want it to pull in the numbers that it's being assigned in the employee ID field, but it has to be a similar data type. So in our customers table, we're going to need to change that employee field from short text to number. So I'm going to go ahead and close my employees table. And We're going to attempt to make that change right here. So in the customers table where it says short text, go ahead and select number. And it's going to tell you that you can't change the data type because this table is part of a relationship. So we would have to go and get rid of the relationship first and then change this. And we're going to do that now. So click OK on that message and you can close your customers table. And we don't have to save any changes. We're going to go back to database tools and relationships. And I'm going to click on the join line between customers and employees and press delete on my keyboard. And then I'm going to confirm the deletion. I'm going to close my relationships window. And now I can go back and make that change. So I'm going to reopen the customers table in design view. And I should be able to change the employee field to the number data type now. I'm going to save that table. It's telling me some data might be lost. Once you change your field when it's populated, it can lose some data. We're going to say, yes, we want to continue anyway. We're going to close this table. And now we're going to go back to our relationships window and recreate that relationship, and we'll do the security at the same time. So I'm going to drag employee ID from the employees table to the employee field in the customers table tile. And then when the edit relationship box pops up, I'm going to go ahead and enforce referential integrity and cascade update related fields, and then click create. So has to be the same data type. Going to go ahead and close the relationships window again, and then we'll test out our referential integrity. Testing referential integrity is pretty easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to just open up our products table, and we're going to make a change in here. We're going to change a product ID and the product name. So the third product from the top, the ID is HLTPNK for pink. We're going to change that PNK to BLU for blue. And be consistent, so make it all caps. And then in the product name field, we're going to change pink to blue and also be consistent there. So that's in normal casing. And so we made a change. We need to just get away from that record row so that that change is saved. And now we're going to see if this flowed through to related tables. We can go ahead and close the products table. And actually, I'm going to open it again just to point out something else. When I come in here and I do the plus sign, it's showing me the order details for that. So I'm looking and I'm seeing order ID 5, 9, so on and so forth. And we're going to view those orders now to see if they accepted the change, which they should have because we're enforcing referential integrity. So in the orders table, I'm going to open it up and I'm looking at order ID 5, but it's not showing the product here. If I do the plus sign in front of that, it shows me the order details, and there is that HLT blue. So we can see that it made the change, because if you change it in the one table, it's going to force the change to related tables. So that's how you can test out your referential integrity. So now what I'm going to do is just go ahead and close this orders table, and we're good to go with our relationship security. Now that we've learned about relationship security, we're going to move into how to control query results with join types. So we have different relationship types, and we also have different join types. And we're going to dive into that in a little bit more detail before we go back over to Access. So in the slide deck, there's a link to information that gives you more information about join types and how they impact your query results. I'm going to just pull that up on my screen. Give me a second here. So another Microsoft article what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to where it says in this article. And what I want to focus on right now are the types of joins. This is important because it will impact your query results. So we're going to go over these briefly, and then you'll see in action how they work in Access. So inner joins, which is the default join type, like when you do a query, if you do nothing to the join type, it is an inner join. So only related data from both tables will be combined in the results. For example, if you do a query between the customers and orders table, it's only going to show you the customers who have placed orders. So only related data from both tables is combined. Most of the time, you're going to use inner joins, and again, it is the default join type in Access. Then you have an outer join, which is all the related data combined correctly, plus all the remaining records from one table. So in our same scenario, we could see the customers that have placed orders as well as the customers who haven't placed orders in the same query if we're using an outer join and we're telling it to bring in all the records from the customer table, regardless of whether they have a matching record in the orders table. And then you have what's called a full outer join, right? It includes all rows from both tables with rows combined when they correspond. Access doesn't explicitly support this type of join. However, in Access, you can use what's called a cross join and criteria to achieve the same effect. And then you have the cross joins. Most of the time, a cross join is a side effect of adding two tables to a query and then forgetting to join them. Access will think that this means that you want to see every record from one table combined with every record from the other table and every possible combination of records. Because no data can be combined, this kind of join rarely produces useful results. But there are a few cases when you would need to use a cross join. And then you have unequal joins. They're not used very often. It uses an operator rather than an equal sign to compare values, so greater than or less than, that kind of thing, but you're using different comparison operators. So again, this link is in the slide deck that's in the video description, so you'll be able to reference it in the future. So in Access, we're going to use query design to build a query. So let's go to our Create tab on the ribbon and get into query design. We're going to use the customers table and the orders table in this query. And I'm going to go ahead and close the show table box once I have those two table instances. So from the customers table, I'm going to go ahead and double click company name, address 1, and city so that those fields populate the grid. And then I want all of the fields from the orders table. I'll show you the easiest way of getting all of the fields in. So I'm going to just double click TBL orders right in that table title bar, and it selects all the fields. And I'm going to just grab by clicking and holding and drag to the first empty field cell on the bottom half in the grid. And when you let go, it'll put all of the fields in there from the orders table. So right now, let's take a look at what this query will look like. We're going to go and click the upper half of the view button. So it's showing the customers, right? Their address, right? Their order IDs, same thing. Customer ID is showing as the name. So we maybe don't need that from the orders table. We can get rid of the customer ID field. And then we have the order dates and the ship dates. So this is by default what is known as an inner join. It's only showing customers who have placed orders. There's matching records in both tables. I'm going to do the upper half of the view button again to get back to design view. And the first thing I'm going to do is put my mouse right on top of the customer ID column in the grid. and I'm going to just select it and press delete. We don't need that, it's redundant. But now we're going to look at what happens when we change the type of join. So I am going to double click the join line here. And you'll notice here in the query design view, it's showing the join properties dialog box, right? So in programming languages, they're known as the left table and the right table. The left table is the table that appears first, right, in the query. In this case, it's the customers table. But you don't even have to worry about that at this point in Access. So the left table is the customers table. Now, what you need to look at are the option buttons on the lower half of the screen. So option button 1 represents an inner join. Only include rows where the joined fields from both tables are equal. So customers who have placed orders. The second option, you don't have to worry about left or right because you're not doing anything programmatically right now. You're just picking an option button. It tells you include all records from TBO customer and only those records from TBO orders where the joined fields are equal. If I'm telling it to include all records from customers, go ahead and do option button 2 and click OK. And now let's view this query. So you'll see that we have customers in here that haven't placed any orders. Both the order date and the ship date fields are empty. So it's showing us all customers regardless of whether they place orders. And that is known as a left outer join. I'm going to go back to the upper half of the view button and double click the join line again. Now the third choice shouldn't make any sense, which is include all records from orders and only those records from customers where the joined fields are equal. You shouldn't have any orders without a customer attached to them. But if you want to take a moment and choose option button 3, click OK and view again, this point we're getting the same thing because we don't have any orders without a customer attached to them. So we're getting something similar to the first choice, the inner join, showing all the customers who have placed orders. It just doesn't make sense between those two tables for an outer join using the orders table. So I'm back in design view and I'm going to double click the join line again and choose option 1 again, which is the default, the inner join, where it's going to just show you customers who have placed orders. And I'm going to click OK. And now what I'm going to do is we're going to save this query and we're going to name it QRY, and then it's going to be customers orders. And we can go ahead and close it. So now our next lesson in this module, we're going to create slightly more complex queries with multiple criteria. We're going to revisit using wildcards, and we're going to learn how to use and or conditions as criteria in our queries. I'm going to show you another way to create a query here that's pretty awesome. Use it a lot. So we already have our customers query, and I am going to just double click it to open it, to run it. And then I'm going to go to the File tab on the ribbon, and I'm going to choose Save As. When I do Save As, I have Save Database As. That's if you want to rename your database, save it somewhere else, and Save Object As. I'm going to use Save Object As, and then click the Save As button. So it's saving query customers to copy of query customers as a query. So you can take a query and save it as a query, a form, or a report. We're going to just take a query and save it as another query. We're going to give this query another name. So we're going to get rid of copy of, and we're going to name this one query customers. And then we're going to do capital Z zip 93. So any zip codes that begin with 93 is what's going to be in this query. We're going to go ahead and click OK. So now we have our queries customer is closed. We did a save as, so the query customer zip 93 is what's open. And we want to take that query to design view. So we use the asterisk wildcard before. It represents any number of characters. And so in the zip field in the grid, we're going to go to the criteria cell and we're going to type 93 asterisk, meaning any zip that begins with 93, any zip code. If we did asterisk 93, it would be any zip code ending in 93 preceded by anything. So we have that in there. And again, once you work in the grid, you want to tab so that if there's any extra formatting that needs to be done, it will do it for you. We saw this earlier. So now it says like 93 asterisk, and the 93 asterisk is in double quotes. So we can go ahead and use the upper half of the view button, and we'll see the two entries that come up in this query. So just another example of what you can do with queries and how to create them. So I'm going to go ahead and close that query. It's going to ask me if I want to save the changes. Say yes. So we did a query by doing a save object as on another query. Let's open our customer's query in design view. So I'm just right-clicking on it in the navigation pane and going directly to design view. And we want to add some criteria conditions here using and or. And so you'll see the difference in how you set this up. So we're going to do this for a state, right? We already have a query for customers from Idaho and Illinois. We're going to do another one for California and Oregon. So for state, in the criteria field, I'm going to type CA space and then or, the word or, space, and then OR for Oregon. So California or Oregon. That's what we're putting in the state criteria field. We're using an or statement in the criteria cell. We could do California in the criteria cell. Notice underneath your criteria, you have an or row. So I could put Oregon down in the or row if I wanted to. You'll see it done commonly all in the criteria cell, if possible. So we're going to just go to the upper half of the view button again, and we have our results. And we're going to go back to design view and delete that California or Oregon criteria out of the state field. And we have another one that we're going to do now. So we want the state criteria to just be CA for California. And we want the zip criteria to be 93 asterisk. So we're only interested in the California customers that have a zip code beginning with 93. When it's all in the same row, different fields like that, and you're using the criteria, it's an and situation. So California and the zip code begins with 93. Go ahead and tab out of that if you haven't, so it does any formatting, and do the upper half of your view button, and you'll see that we have those two customers in California. So we can go back to design view, delete the criteria from state, and delete the criteria from zip, and then you can close the query without saving any changes. Our next lesson in this module is how to calculate data with queries. So in our queries, we can create custom fields using calculations, and you can also do grouping. So earlier when we used a report wizard, we decided to do a grouping option in a report. It looked horrible, so we got rid of it, but we're going to do a grouping in a query in this lesson. We're going to use our customers query for this again. So we're going to open it in design view. And one of the things we want to do is we want to add another table to this query. So on the Query Design tab of the ribbon, in the Query Setup group, you can go ahead and click that Add Tables button to bring up that dialog, so you can choose the Employees table by double-clicking it to add it to this query. So we're going to be using fields from the Employees table. What we'd like to happen right now in this query, and as well as in the customers table, is just showing the employee by last name. We want to create a concatenated field that combines the first and the last name, and we want a space between the two names. So in order to do that, this is how it works. We're going to go to the first blank field cell and right-click on it, and you're going to go to Build. And it brings you into Expression Builder. And don't worry about Expression Builder. It looks a lot harder than it really is. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to type what we want to be the name of the field after an equal sign. So every expression begins with equal. So we're going to do equal. And then we're going to type the word full name, no space in between, just initial capital letters, and a colon. Now, anything before the colon is what you're naming the field. So the equal sign is just like in Excel. When you do a calculation, everything starts with equal. So the name of the field is full name. Now, underneath that on the left, you'll see expression elements, and you'll see your database. And I'm going to expand the database and expand the tables. And then I'm going to click on TBL employees, so I can see all of the fields in that table. And I'm going to double click on employee first, and notice it goes up in the top part of the Expression Builder box. It puts an extraneous thing in there right before TBL employees. It has this EXPR for expression. You're going to just click on that EXPR and delete it. Not necessary. So right now, full name is going to equal the employee first name. Click after employee first. And the ampersand is the concatenation character. So we're going to do an ampersand, a set of double quotes, so an opening double quote, I should say, space, and then close the double quote, because we want a space between the first and the last name. And in order to do it, we have to have that. That's considered a text field. It has to be in double quotes. So now in our field list, we're going to just double click under expression categories, employee last. And we're going to get rid of that EXPR again in front of that. So you have equal full name colon. Then notice it references the table name in square brackets. And in between the table name and the field name, there's an exclamation point. And then the field name is in square brackets. We use the ampersand, and I forgot another ampersand. So after your set of empty double quotes, you need another ampersand, because we're concatenating the first name to the space and then the space to the last name, if that makes any sense. And then we're going to go ahead and click OK, and we can see that expression in that field. Let's click the upper half of the View button, and we should see full name. Now, I forgot, they just did an update, so we don't need that equal sign. We're going to go ahead and change it, right? We won't need the equal sign there because it's making it part of the name. So I'm going to go back into Design View, and I'm just going to right click. Well, I actually don't even have to do that. I can just click in that cell and backspace to get rid of the equal sign. And now I'm going to view it again. So there we have the concatenated equal sign. It's a calculated field. We use the builder, the expression builder, to build it. When you get really comfortable in Access, I typically just type that stuff in. I find it to be a lot quicker for me than, expanding everything in Expression Builder to be able to get to what I need. But you do what's most comfortable for you. And we're going to go ahead and save the changes to this query and then close it. Now we're going to create another query. We're going to do it in Design View. And we're going to add some more calculations to it, but just in a different way. So we did a simple concatenation calculation. Now we're going to go to create, back to create, and back to query design. And for this one, we want to have the orders table in the query. And well, we actually going to want to have several tables. So I'll just give you all of the tables. We're going to want the customers table. We're going to want the orders table, and it doesn't matter the order that you put these in. We're going to also want the products table. And let's see, do we have any more? Oh, the order details table. We have to have that one as well. So, just close the show table dialog box, and I'm going to flip my table panes just a little bit different. And I'm going to expand them just so I can see all of the fields in every table and get rid of that scroll bar. It's actually a pet peeve of mine. If you don't mind it, you don't have to do that. But I find it useful to be able to see all of the fields and not have to scroll for them, for all of the table tiles. So the fields that we want to add for this particular query, from the customers table, we're going to double click company name. From the orders table, we're going to double click order date and ship date. From the products table, we're going to double click product name. And we're also going to double click price from the products table. And then from order details, we're going to grab the quantity field. So we have company name, order date, ship date, product name, price, and quantity in our grid. And now we're going to create our calculated fields. So this time what we're going to do, we're going to create two of them. One, we're going to get a line item total. And the second one, we're going to calculate a discounted total. So we're going to right click in the first blank field cell to the right of the quantity field. And this time, let's just do zoom. So you get that big screen that you can see a lot better. And we're going to type it in this screen. If you want to change the size of your font, there's a font button in the lower left corner of that screen. If you need to access that, if necessary, you can get to that if you need your font to be larger. And so in here, we're going to create the calculated field, which is line item total. That's what we're going to name the calculation. So we're going to just type line item total, just with initial caps. And we're going to do the colon afterwards so that Access knows that that's the name of the field. Again, anything before the colon is the name of the field. And then we're going to do an open square bracket, and we're going to just type price. That's the name of a field, and close the square bracket. We're going to do an asterisk for multiplication, open square bracket, and you're going to type quantity, which is another field. So line item total is the price times the quantity. And we're going to click OK. So now if we go to view, the upper half of the view button, we'll see the line item total. It's taking the price and timesing it by the quantity, and it's doing the calculation for us. So I'm applauding you. You just created a calculated field with a real calculation, not just a concatenation in it. And we're going to go back to design view for that query because we have another calculation that we're going to do. And this one is going to be the discounted total. So we're going to go to the next blank field cell, right click on it and zoom so that you can actually have a bigger screen to view it in than the screen we worked on when we were in build. And this one we are naming discounted total, capital D, capital T, all mushed together, and the colon. This one is going to be price. So in square brackets, price, close the square brackets. We're going to do asterisk again for multiplication. And in square brackets, the quantity field. And then we're going to do another asterisk, 0.9. So basically price times quantity, and we're actually doing like 10% discount, right? The discounted total. So we're using the other part, the 90%, to represent that there. So discounted total, right, is the price times quantity times 0.9. We can go ahead and click OK. Go to the upper half of the view button, and now you'll see that you have both your line item total and your discounted total. And Access did the calculations for you. Let's go ahead and save that query. And so we're going to just do save, right click and save, and we're going to call it QRY and then capital O orders. And we can go ahead and close it. Our last lesson in this module is summarizing data with grouping in queries. So we're going to go back to create query design. We're going to start with a new query for this one, and we're going to be using multiple tables for this one. So the first table that we're going to want to use is products. We also want order details, categories, and let me just check to see if there's anything else we want. Yes, we want the orders table as well. So we're going to go ahead and close the show table dialog. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make sure I can see all the fields in my tables. You don't have to do this. Again, I'm not forcing my OCD onto anyone else here. And I'll just move them around a little bit. And so the first field that we're going to add is going to be the product name field from the product table. So I just double clicked it and it put it in the grid. And then we're going to add the quantity field from order details. And again, you add these fields in the order that you want them to show in the query. We're also going to add the order date from the orders table and the category field from the categories table. Now you'll notice in the grid, and I'm going to just make my grid area expand. In the grid, there is nothing that says group in the grid. You have field, table, sort, show, criteria, or. Those are your choices. So in order to be able to group, we're going to need to add another field. And the way we do that is from using the query design ribbon. On that ribbon to the right, there's a show hide group. And in that show hide group, you'll see the totals button. And we're going to use that button to add another row to our grid. So when I click on totals, then I get a total row right under the table row in the grid. And when you add the total row, it defaults to group by for every field that you had there. So let's do another thing. We want to add the quantity field in again. And the quantity field is coming from the order details table. So I'm going to just use that table instance and double click quantity again. And then I'm going to move it by putting my mouse at the top of the heading so I get that down arrow. I can click and hold. When it selects the whole column, then I click again in the black band at the top and I can drag it to a different location. So I'm going to put the second instance of quantity right to the right of the first instance of it. So now it's grouping by everything just by adding that, right? Let's go and click on the totals button again, and it gets rid of that group by row. Let's view this the way it is right now. So it's just showing the product names, right? We have an expression there we don't need to worry about. It's showing the quantity field twice. That's what it is. Order date and category. So I'm going to just go back to design view and we'll start doing our groupings. So click on your totals button again, and it's grouping by product name, which is fine by us. But we want a sum of the quantity. So the first quantity field where it says group by, you're going to do the drop down and choose sum. The second quantity field where it says group by, you're going to do the drop down and select average. So we can see the average and the sum of the quantity for the group product names. We'll leave order date the way it is, right? We don't want to calculate anything on the order dates at this point. And the category is fine. It'll group the categories after it does the other groupings. So we're going to go ahead and click view again. So now you can see all the products are grouped together, right? So all your black ballpoint pens are together. You're seeing the sum of quantity and the average of quantity. It looks like something's wrong with that calculation because it's the same number. I'll figure that out and put it in the document that you can get from the video description, right? We'll just go back in and delete the average of quantity field for right now, but it's not doing the calculation, and it should, unless there's only one. So the average is the same as the sum, and that's more than likely because we don't have a lot of different records in this database. Then it's showing the order dates per grouping and then the category per grouping. So grouping I'm going back to design view. Grouping is a matter of adding the totals row, and then you could choose the calculation or the ability to group by. So we'll leave sum and average because I think they're right. It's just one number for each one. So the average is going to be the sum. But we're going to go ahead and save this query. And we're going to call this QRY product order count. And click OK. And we can close it. Yay! So just to recap Module 3, we learned how relationships can affect queries by the different join types, right? So you learned about the inner join, the outer join, all of that kind of stuff. You have reference in this PowerPoint slide deck so you can study more about join types. Then we created complex queries with multiple criteria, and we did some calculations in queries, and we did some summarization as well. In Module 4, we'll continue learning more about things you can do with queries in Access, and we'll get some advanced report design techniques in this module. So we're going to start by automating queries with parameters, and you'll see an example of that when we get into it. Then we're going to use some query wizards that we haven't used before. We're going to explore a group of queries known as action queries, and then we'll get into the advanced report design techniques. Earlier, we created the query customers Idaho and Illinois. Let's go ahead and open that query in design view so we can review what we did. So in this one, we used the criteria field and we used like I. So it gave us the two states that begin with the letter I. Actually, we did like I asterisk, so I followed by anything. You can create queries that prompt the end user for what they want. Those are known as parameter queries. So you still use criteria, but it works in a different way. Let's go ahead and close this query. And we're going to create a new one that we turn into a parameter query. So instead of creating the query from scratch, let's make a copy of our customer's query in the navigation pane. And then we're going to name this new query. So we're going to get rid of copy of. And it's going to be query customers. And at the end, we're just going to type param, abbreviation for parameter. So query customers param. And let's go ahead and click OK. And now we're going to open query customers param in design view. So this query, we don't have any criteria in it, but we're going to create criteria that prompts the end user to enter the state that they want the query to display. So in the state column, we're going to click in the criteria cell, and it's the way you do the criteria that makes it a parameter query. So we're going to put what we want the end user to see when they run this query in square brackets. So do an open square bracket and type enter a state and closing square bracket. That's the message that will pop up for the end user when they run this query. So we entered that in the criteria cell. We're just going to click out of that cell and go ahead and view. Use your upper half of the view button. And you can see it doesn't show anything in this point because this for a parameter query. So we'll just go back to design view. For a parameter query, when we go over to switch to see the query results, it's not going to bring up the prompt. When we switch back to design view, you'll see the prompt. So the prompt says enter a state, and we're going to just type in CA and click OK. So now when it runs the query, it's only running it for California. We're going to go ahead and close that query, save your changes to the design. And this time we're going to double click it to open it. And when you double click it from the navigation pane, it brings up the prompt immediately. So this time we'll put in, let's do OR and click OK. Notice it's not case sensitive. I typed OR in all lowercase. So now we're seeing the query showing the results, the records, the 2 records from Oregon, and we can close it. So what makes it a parameter query is by putting the prompt in square brackets in the criteria field. That's how that kind of works. We can also use wildcards in a parameter query. Let's copy the customer's query again and paste it. And this time we're going to name it QRY. Here, let me get rid of copy of. And at the end of customers, it's going to be capital A-H. So we only want to see customer names that begin with the letters A through H. And we're going to click OK. And let's open that query in design view so we can make it into a parameter query. So in the company name field, we're going to go to the criteria cell. And we're going to type the word like, and then in double quotes and square brackets, A-H. Close your square bracket, type in asterisk, and a closing double quote. So if I'll zoom in on that so you can see what it looks like, right? It should look like this. So like, double quote, open square bracket, A-H, closing square bracket, asterisk, closing double quote. So any company names that begin with the letters A through H, followed by anything, is what we're looking for in this parameter. And that's using, wildcards. We have the brackets with the letter range as well as the asterisk. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK to close the zoom box. And again, if you don't want to type in these little cells, you can always right click and zoom and then do your typing. And I'm going to just tab out of that field. Just good practice, good habit. Even though we gave it everything it needed, you just always want to tab out just in case. And this time we're going to use the run button on the ribbon. So this one is also considered a parameter query, right? We can do that and it comes up, but it's just showing the ones A through H, right? It's not prompting the end user for the parameter. We built it into the wildcard. Now, if we wanted to, we could build a prompt into this one. We're going to leave this one as is. So I'm going to just close it and we're going to save our changes. And we're going to create another one where we're going to use range operators and we'll build in a prompt in that one. So we're going to do this on the orders query, but we want to leave the orders query as we have it. So we're going to make a copy of it and paste it. And we're going to just name it QRY orders param. And we're going to click OK. Now we're going to open it in Design View and set up the parameter. So what we want to happen for this one is we want it to prompt the user for a range of order dates, right? So it's actually going to be prompting them for two different pieces of information. And we're going to use the between operator. So we're in the order date column in the criteria cell. I'm going to right click and zoom on it so we can actually see what we're typing while we're typing it instead of the other way around. And for this one, you're going to type the keyword between and then open square bracket, enter the start date, closing square bracket. And when you use the between keyword, you always have to use the and keyword. So I'm going to type and then another open square bracket, enter the end date, and close the square bracket. So it's going to be two prompts to the end user. We're going to click OK. And let's right click on the query tab and go ahead and save it. And on the Query Design tab of the ribbon, we're going to go ahead and click the Run button. So there's our first prompt. We're going to just put in 6/1/2010 and click OK. There's your second prompt, and that's going to be 6/30/2010. So we decide we want to just see the orders for June of that year. And we click OK. And there's our results. We'll notice that the order dates are all in the month of June 2010. So another example of a parameter query, and we can go ahead and close the query. So the between and the and keywords are the range operators that we used in that parameter query. So earlier we created a query using the simple query wizard, and now we're going to use some other query wizards. Let's go to the Create tab on the ribbon and go back into Query Wizard. We're going to use the Find Duplicates query wizard and the Find Unmatched query wizard. Let's start with Find Duplicates. So this, you'll get to tell it what a duplicate is in your data, right? And so it will find any duplicate records based on what you say is a duplicate. We're going to start with that one. So I selected it and I'm going to click OK. So it says, which table or query do you want to search for duplicate field values? So we're going to be looking in the customers table. So I'm going to select that table right here. And notice at the bottom, I can view tables, queries, or both in this list. It defaults to tables. So we want to find duplicate customers. And we're going to do next. Which fields might contain duplicate information? And it gives you an example. If you're looking for cities with more than one customer, you could choose city and region fields here. So what we're interested in is seeing if we have any duplicates in terms of the company name field. So we're going to click on company name. I'm going to actually double click it so it goes over to the right. And then I'm going to do next. So we're telling it that company name is the field that we want to use as a duplicate field. And then do you want the query to show fields in addition to those with duplicate values? That's what this screen is. So yeah, we would like to see the customer ID, address 1, city, and state. That's what would make a duplicate. So if they have the same customer name, but something in these fields are different, then it's not a true duplicate. And we're going to do next. So typically, with these types of queries, you don't rename them. The name is explaining what the query does. So find duplicates for TBL customers. If you end up adding a whole bunch more customers through a form or in the table, and you run this query again in 6 months, if there are any new duplicates, they will show in the query. So we're going to go ahead and click Finish. So we have 2 duplicate company names, but it's not a true duplicate. It looks like 2 different branches of the same company. One is in California, one is in Houston. So, and they have different customer IDs. So it's not a real duplicate. So because we have primary key fields in here, it would be hard to create an exact duplicate record. It would have to have the same customer ID, and that's impossible because it's an auto number field. You can go ahead and close that query and always say yes when it asks you to save the changes to the layout. Earlier, when we worked with the join types in queries, we changed the join type for the customer's query to an outer join. And so it showed the customers that hadn't placed orders. Well, there's a query wizard that can do that for you. So we're going to go back to Query Wizard on the Create tab. And this time we're going to use the Find Unmatched Query Wizard. So the wizard creates a query that finds records in one table that have no related records in another table. So customers who don't have orders. We're going to go ahead and click OK. So the query you create will list records in the table you select below that have no related records in the table you select on the next screen. For example, you can find customers that have no orders. That's exactly the scenario we're using. So we're going to start with the customers table, and we're going to do next. And then we're going to click on the orders table. And it gives you prompts at the top, letting you know what you should be doing on these screens. And we're going to do next. What piece of information is in both tables? So this is where you have to tell it what the matching field is. On the left side, it's showing the fields in the customers table. Customer ID is the matching field that's already selected. On the right side, it's showing the fields in the order table, and we have to click on the customer ID field to select it. And then you'll notice the less than, equal, great than symbol button in the middle of them. You need to click on that so that the matching fields show down in the matching fields box. And now you're going to click Next. What fields do you want to see in the query results? Well, we want to see the customers that don't have any orders. We probably want to reach out to them. So we're going to do company name, and we'll do the phone field and the email field. And maybe we'll send them some marketing materials, some promotional materials, offer them a discount, whatever we need to do so they order from us. And we'll do next. So another query wizard, we're not going to rename the query. It's TBL customers without matching TBL orders. And we're going to click Finish. So these are all the customers that don't have any orders in. And like I said, we might give this to our salespeople, let them make some phone calls or email and see what's going on. And we can go ahead and close that query and save your changes. So for the query wizard, you have the simple query, which we used a couple of times, find duplicates, find unmatched. There's also a cross-tab query wizard that I'll let you play with on your own. I'm going to just cancel out of there. So far in this course, we've only been creating queries that are known as select queries. Select queries do not change the data in your table. They have no impact on the data in your table. There is a way to impact the data in the table from a select query, and I'll show you that in a moment. But really, the types of queries that impact the data in your tables are as a group known as action queries. So we're going to do a deep dive into action queries. So I mentioned that there is a way that you can change table data from using a regular select query. And it's a real huge convenience factor in Access. So let's double click Query Customers to run it. And we'll notice, say we run this query and we notice that the customer name, the company name, Grappling Grapes, is wrong. So instead of closing the query and going back to the table and making the change, you can make the change right in the query and it will flow back to the table, thereby impacting your table data. So I'm going to double click the word grappling, and the company name should really be Gracious Grapes. And I'm going to type it in. Now, notice when I'm typing it, that row header, right, has a little pencil icon in it. And this is the same thing that happens when you enter data in a table. When you're in that row, it shows the pencil icon letting you know that the row is being populated or edited, right, in some way. So just like in a table, to save this change, you just have to get out of that row. So I'm going to press the down arrow on my keyboard to just navigate to the next row. And now I made the change in the query. I'm going to go ahead and save and close that query. Now, if I go and open up the customers table, I'll see that that change flowed into the table from the query. So if you edit in a query when you run it, a regular select query, that's the only way you can impact table data. And we're going to close that table. So now we're back to the Create tab. And we're going to go to Query Design. And we'll go ahead and let's see, which table should we use? We'll use the Customers table here. And I'm going to close the Show Table box. And you know what I'm getting ready to do next, so I can see all of my fields. And we're going to build this query. And we're going to have, let's see, we're going to put, I don't want quite all of the fields. So we're going to put company name. We'll do address 1, city, state, and zip. Those are the fields that we're going to want in this query. Now, I mentioned that the types of queries we've been doing since we've been in this course have been select queries, which do not impact the table data. On the Query Design tab of the ribbon, you have a query type group, and you'll notice that the select icon is already shaded. That's the default. When you come into Query Design, it assumes that you're going to want to build a select query. You have other query types up there, and some of them are action queries. So the ones that have the exclamation point, regardless of color, are your action queries. These queries directly impact your table data. So the Make Table query, and if you hover over it, it'll tell you what it does. It makes the query select records from the database and save the records as a new table. So this is another way of making a new table in your database, impacting the data. The append query, now we did an append operation through importing from Excel for our customers and employees tables earlier. This is a query that can add records to an existing table. The update query, if you need to change something like a product price or something like that, you can use the update query to do it. It impacts the data in the table. And the last one is the most dangerous one to use. It's the delete action query. So it can delete the information from an existing table where the data matches criteria you put in. Now this one is difficult because when you delete a record from a table, there's no way of getting that record back. If you delete all of the records in the table, there's no way of getting that information back unless you have a very recent backup of your database. So use the delete query with caution. We're going to start with a Make Table query. So let's go ahead and click Make Table. So we want to make a new table, and you can either make it in the current database or in another database. we're going to leave it in the current database. So actually, before we do this, let's cancel that for a minute. We wanted to put some criteria here. So for the state field down in your grid, let's go ahead in the criteria cell and type OR for Oregon and tab out of there so it puts the double quotes around it. We only want Oregon customers in this table. So we're going to go back to make table, and the new table is going to be called TBL customers and then OR for Oregon. And we're going to leave it in the current database, and we're going to click OK. On the ribbon, if you go ahead and click the Run button, it will tell you that you're about to paste 3 rows into a new table. It also tells you once you click yes, you can't use undo to reverse the changes. So for a make table query, there is a way to reverse this, and that would be to delete the new table that you create if you do this, say, accidentally on purpose. We're going to click on yes, that we want to create a new table with the selected records. And then we're going to just save this query, right? And when I right clicked on the tab to save, my customers OR table populated, right? Now, actually, we're not going to save this query because we don't want to run it again, because it will just do the same thing. We'll have another table. It'll call it customers OR1 because you can't have the same object name. So there's no point in saving this. We're going to just close this query, and we don't have to save the changes to the design. And you can go ahead and open the customers OR table, and you'll see those 3 Oregon customers. So that's another way of making a table. I'm going to just go ahead and close that, and we'll go back to create, and we'll do our next action query. So I have my query open in design view, just in case you got stuck on that. The only thing I did was I changed the criteria to California. So I did a query design using the customers table and made the criteria California. And then I changed it into a make table query. I named the new table TBL customers California. And then I did run. So it actually executed it and created the table. So I'm going to just close this without saving the changes, because again, this is one you don't want to run again at this point. We don't want to recreate the table again. So we're not going to save it. So that's how you make tables using an action query. Our next one that we're going to do, so we did the make table one. Now we're going to do an append query. So we're going to go back to query design on the create tab, and we're going to choose the, we're going to choose the TBL customers Oregon for this one and just add that. Oops, I added it twice, so I'll get rid of my second instance. And then we're going to grab some fields from here. So we want all of the fields. So I'm going to just double click the title bar and then just grab one field and drag it down to the first field cell. So we have all of these fields in here from that table. And now we're going to turn this into an append query by clicking append. And so we want to append the Oregon customers to the California customers table. So we're going to click in table name and then do the drop down and choose TBL customers California in the current database and then click OK. So now we're going to run this query, and it says you're about to append 3 rows. Again, you can't undo this. I mean, you could literally undo it by going into the table and deleting those rows, but you won't be able to use the undo command. So we're going to go ahead and click yes. And we're going to open TBL Customers California, and you'll see that it now has the California and the Oregon records. And we are going to go ahead and close that table. We're not going to save this query because we're probably not going to want to do that again. So we can close the query as well. You don't have to save changes. But what we need to do is at this point, we don't need the Oregon table, so we're going to delete it. We're going to right click on it and we're going to choose delete and confirm the deletion. And then we're going to rename TBL Customer CA to TBL Customer CA and then OR. Just so it's accurate to what's in that table now. The next action query that we're going to use is the update query. So our scenario for this is we have customers that currently have a zip code of 97045, and we've been notified that that zip code has been updated to 97046. So we're going to use an update query to make that change. Let's go back to create and then query design and grab your customers table for this one. And when you're doing an update query, you just want to use the field that you want to update. So in our case, it's the zip field. And what we're going to do is we're going to put in the criteria of what the zip code field is currently now. And that is 97045. And we're going to tab out of that criteria cell again so it can put whatever formatting on it that it may need. Now we're ready to turn this into an update query. So we're going to click update in the query design tab. And what that does is it adds another row to the grid. So you have update 2. And in update 2, we're going to type 97046 and tab out of that field. So we're telling it for the zip code that is 97045, we want to update it to 97046. So go ahead and run this query, and it lets you know that you're about to update 2 rows. And again, you can't undo it. You would have to manually undo it or run another update query to change it back. So we're going to go ahead and click yes. So that change should have happened, and we're not going to want to save this query either because we don't want to run it again. So we can close this query, and we don't need to save the changes. And let's just run our customers query. And we can see for that zip code, there should be 3 entries here for that zip code, but we can see that it's 97046. I don't think this one's showing everything. So if we open the customers table, we should see all 3 records there. So 97046, the change has been made. And we can go ahead and close all the table and the query. The last type of action query that we're going to use is the delete query, the dreaded delete query. Again, if you don't have a recent backup, you won't be able to get these records back. So what we're going to do before we do this is we're going to make a copy of the customers table. So I'm going to right click on customers and copy it. And then I'm going to right click again and paste. With a table, you get different paste options. You can paste the structure only. So that would be just the field names, really. All of the column headings would be the structure only. You can copy the structure and the data, which is the choice we're going to use. Or you can append the data to an existing table. So we're going to name this new table. We'll just leave it copy of TBL customers for right now, because we're going to end up deleting it anyway, totally. So we'll just leave that name and click OK. We don't want to mess with our regular customers table. So the copy of has all of the data in it. And we're going to go to our Create tab and go back to Query Design. And we're going to choose Copy of TBL Customers and add that. And what we want to do is we are going to drag all of the fields. So I'm going to double click the title bar, drag the field down to the first field cell. So we have all of the fields in this query. And now we're going to go up and make it into a delete query. So it says, you notice when we did that, it creates a where line. So delete, you get a where row rather, right? And we don't have any criteria in there. So we're going to go ahead and put after the fact criteria. And we're going to delete all of the records that are in the state of California. So I am going to put CA and tab out of the criteria field for state. And now I'm going to run the query. So it lets you know you're about to delete 3 rows from the specified table, right? So it's going to delete the 3 California rows. I'm going to click yes to confirm it. And now if I open copy of TBL customers, I shouldn't have any California records in there. Now, again, you wouldn't be able to get those records back, right? Unless you had a recent database. And that's why we made a copy of the table before we did this. So we're going to close both the table and the query. We're not going to save changes to the query because we don't want to run that again. And we're just going to right click and delete on that copy of the customers table. So we don't have any redundancy here. And we'll say yes to confirm the deletion. Our last lesson in this module, we'll go over some advanced report design techniques. You've already become familiar with some of the report control types. We'll review some more, as well as learning how to group and summarize report data. We're going to use the report wizard to create a report where we'll enable some grouping. So let's go to our Create tab, our favorite place to hang out and access, and we're going to click on Report Wizard. We want to create a report. We're going to end up naming it Orders by Customer, and we're going to base it on the orders query. So I'm going to do the Table Queries drop down, and I'm going to find QRY Orders and select it. We only want to include 3 fields in the report. So that will be company name, order date, and discounted total. So we have those on the right side of the screen and we're ready to click next. So we did a grouping on our report that we created earlier, the products report, and then we got rid of the grouping because it didn't make sense. This one will make a little bit more sense. So for the grouping field, we're going to double click company name. And so for every company, it's going to be showing the order date and the discounted total. And we can do next. So we're not going to do a sort. We could, but we don't need to. And we're going to do next. We'll leave it in the stepped layout, next. And we're going to name this using our RPT prefix. And it's going to be Orders by Customer. And then go ahead and click Finish. So you can see this one makes more sense now. For each company name, you're seeing the order dates and you're seeing the discounted totals. If you scroll to the bottom, you'll notice that it has the current date and the page that you're on. You can use the navigation at the bottom to navigate to different pages, to view the rest of the information. So let's right click on that report tab And let's take it to layout view. The first thing we want to change is the title of the report. And again, we could do this in layout or design view, doesn't matter. Again, a reminder, layout view just shows the underlying data. Design view just shows the grid and the sections and whatever controls are on the report. So we're just going to call this customer orders. We don't need the RPT because it's actually on the report. And we can click away from it. So this report has a grouping in it, and it's grouped by customer or company name in this case. So you can see the data per each customer. Let's go ahead and close this report and save the changes. So now we're going to create another report, and we're going to summarize. We're going to name the report RPT Order Summary. And we're going to use the wizard again to create this one. And we're going to base it on the same orders query that we used for the previous one. We want the same fields: company name, order date, discounted total. And this one, when we do next, we are going to do the grouping here. We're going to group by company name again. And by the way, when you choose grouping, this grouping options button becomes available to you. If you click on that button, you can see that the grouping interval defaults to normal. So it's the whole company name, right? If you were creating a report, like say a directory, an in-house directory of employees or something, and you wanted to group them by employee last name, maybe you want to use the first letter. So all the E's would be together, all the F's would be together. So you do have the ability to change grouping intervals. We're going to cancel out of that box, and we're going to click on next. This time, let's sort by order date in ascending order. And underneath that, you have summary options. This is how you can summarize a report. So we're going to click on summary options, and the only fields that can be calculated in the report will show here. So you won't have any fields that you can't perform a sum, average, min, or max function on. We want the sum of discounted total, which is a number field. We'll leave it on detail and summary and click OK on that screen. Now we're ready to do next. We're not changing anything here, so we're going to next. And we're going to name this one RPT Orders Summary. And finish. So what's changed here? We're still grouped by company name. We put our order dates in ascending order this time for each company. But at the end, it has a summary for Astro Advertising. It lets you know there are 16 detail records, and there is the sum of the discounted total. So you were able to group and summarize on the same report. So what else can you do with this report? Well, let's just change the report title here. So you know which view to go to. You could do it in layout or design. We just want it to say order summary in plain English with a space between the two words. Because it's a report, you're going to want to distribute it. So you want to make it as user-friendly as possible. And once you make that change, go ahead and save this report. Now that we've created our reports, we're going to perform some advanced report design techniques on this order summary report. So let's take a look at it in report view. And we decide that we want these headings, company name, the page header, order date, and discounted total to be bold. We also, this summary line, we just wanted to say summary for, and then Astro Advertising 16 detail records. And we would want that to be italicized. We also decide we don't want the word sum to repeat on every company, for every company. We can get rid of that. And we don't want the actual sum of the discounted total to be in a box with a border like it is there. So we're going to do those changes to this in design view. So I'm just going to right click on the tab and navigate to design view where we have our grid. So because we did a grouping by company name, we have a section here called company name header, right? And we have company name footer. Whenever you do a grouping, whatever you group by gets its own header and footer section in the report. In addition, we have the report header, which shows on page 1. The report footer shows on the last page of the report, and your page headers and footers will show on every page of the report. So let's get started. The first thing we want to do is we want to make everything in the page header section bold. So on the report design tab of the ribbon, all the way over to the right in the tools group, we're going to go ahead and click on the property sheet button to open the property sheet. It opens as a panel on the right side of your screen. Just so I have more working space, I'm going to collapse my navigation pane just so I get more space to work in. So now that the property sheet is open, we're going to select the 3 fields in the page header section, the 3 labels rather. Company name, right? And you can select these a couple of different ways. So I just clicked on company name. I'm holding down my shift key and I'm going to click on the other 2 fields, or I can draw what's called a selection net or selection marquee around them. So I'm kind of clicking in the grid to the right of company name, and I'm just going to drag across with my mouse while holding the mouse button down, and that's drawing a net around them so it also selects them. In the property sheet, you'll notice at the top it has multiple selection. We'll visit this drop down in a little bit. And we have 5 different tabs here: format, data, event, other, and all. All includes all of the options that are on the 4 other tabs. So it just depends on what you want to do there. What we want to do is we want to make these 3 fields bold. So we're looking for the font weight property. Oops, my arrow got kind of messed up, but you can see where it is. The font weight property defaults to normal. We're going to click where it says normal, and to the right, there's a drop down. Go ahead and click that drop down, and you're going to select the last one, which is heavy. And the beauty of this is you can, without saving anything you change here, you can just look at what the change will look like. So let's use our tab and go back to report view. And you'll see that the company name, order date, and discounted total fields are bolded. And we're going to switch back to design view. If we're comfortable with that change, I would go ahead and save at this point. I try not to make a lot of changes without saving in between them. So I typically make one change, look at how it looks in report view, and then save, come back and make another one. So that's one thing we wanted to do. The other thing we wanted to do is get rid of the word sum. So that's in the company name footer section. I'm going to just click on sum and press delete on my keyboard. We wanted the summary line to just say summary for the actual name of the company and then the count of records. So it has a redundant company name in there. So let's look at it again. Let's go just to report view. And it says summary for company name equals Astro Advertising. The company name in single quotes is what we want to get rid of. We just want some, and the equal sign. We just wanted to say summary for Astro Advertising and the detail record information. So going back to design view. This edit is what you're going to do, and I'll say it a couple of times because it's kind of tricky. I'm going to just kind of click in that, kind of double click to get my insertion point in that text box. So I clicked after equal double quote summary 4, and I'm going to do my shift key and use my right arrow to start selecting what I want to delete. So I'm getting rid of the double quote after 4. I'm going to keep going. I'm getting rid of that company name and the equal sign. And then I'm getting rid of the ampersand all the way through the ampersand. And then after that, I have 2 double quotes. I'm going to get rid of one of them. So you're selecting after the word for everything up to the double quote, ampersand, and then the company name in square brackets. Now I'm going to press delete. Now the beauty of it is I can go back and look and see, first of all, if I messed it up. So I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to go to report view. So if you have a problem with what you did, it gives you that the expression you entered contains invalid syntax. And I think I know what the invalid syntax is. I have an extra double quote in there after summary 4. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that and then take a look at it in report view. So now it just says summary 4 Astro Advertising 16 detail records. And I want that to be italicized. So I'm going to go back to design view. And I'm going to save because I don't want to have to do that again. And then with just that summary 4 text box selected, in the property sheet, you'll have a font italic property. And that's the property you're going to use. It's set to no, so you're just going to set it to yes. And then go back to report view and take a look at it. So now we have our summary lines in italics. The next thing we want to do here is we want to get rid of the text box around the actual sum. So I'm going to go back to design view. And I'm going to select that text box. It's in the company name footer section, equal sum, and then you have the rest of it. Just going to select it. In the property sheet, we're going to look for the border style property. The border style property defaults to solid. And to get rid of it, we're just going to change solid to transparent. Go back to report view and take a look. And I think it looks better. I mean, it's, personal opinion with how this stuff is displaying. But if I go all the way down to the bottom, you'll notice it had the grand total there. So it is doing the grand total for us. But otherwise, we've done some techniques on this report that make it a little bit more readable, user-friendly, if you will. Let's go back to design view. So I mentioned in here that the controls group is the same in design view as it is for forms. So if you wanted to, you could create a report in design view and add some of these controls to it. I think what I'd like to do is let's go ahead and close this report. And say yes when you're prompted to save changes. And I'm going to expand my navigation pane again. We're going to add a button control to the orders by customer report. So go ahead and open that one in design view. And we're going to put the button in the report header section. So what I'm going to do in the controls group, the button is the rectangle that has the 4 X's on it. I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to drag my mouse, just hover my mouse in the report header section, like over to the right. and I am going to draw a button, or if I click in there, it will give me a button. So that button has to be programmed, and we can program in a variety of ways, but we'll do a simple macro. And what we want that button to do is close the report. So the first thing we're going to do is let's go to, I'll just go to the, I'll just be on the All tab, right? And one of the properties in the property sheet is on click. So what to do with the button when it's clicked. You have other, things, or when you double click it, stuff like that, that you can choose. But we want to use the on click property. So when I click in the box over to the right of it, you'll notice if I do the drop down, it just says event procedure. And if I click the ellipsis button, I choose what builder I want to use. In this case, we're going to do the macro builder. You saw an expression builder before when we were working with queries, and you'll see the code builder a little bit later. But for right now, you're going to get a little bit of macros. We'll do some more of this later in the course. So we're going to leave it on macro builder and click OK. And so what you have is you just basically have a drop down over here. You have the macro design tab of the ribbon, and you have an action catalog on the right. This one's going to be a simple one. So it's saying RPT orders by customer report header on click, and I'm going to do the drop down, and I'm going to choose close window. So then it wants to know the object type. These are all drop downs. This is on a report. The object name is report orders by customer. And so, when you go to close something, if you haven't saved the changes, it automatically prompts you. We can do something different here. We can say, yes, go ahead and just save whenever they close the window, so they don't have to be prompted to save. And on the ribbon, we're going to go up and click save. So we save this, and we're going to close it. Now the only thing left to do is to name the button. So I'm going to just click right on the button, select command, whatever number it gave you, and just type close report. So if you notice in your property sheet, the on click property now says embedded macro. Let's test this. So let's go to report view, and you'll see your close report button. And when you click it, voila, your report will close. This module was extensive. We covered parameter queries, which prompt the end user for information before running the query. We used the query wizard to find duplicate and unmatched records. We created a host of action queries from make table to using the delete query. And we finished up by using advanced report design techniques.